think so many of us, we are afraid to die. And in that fear of death, I think we're also afraid of living.
What would you say to young people who are living in this age of easily accessible information?
Get around elders that have lived life and learn from them. Then the new generation can have a different relationship to the technology and can use the technology rather than being used by the technology.
I agree.
In a way that's wise.
You were a religious man, I assume. You talked about.
I'm not religious. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. I have no interest in religion. If anything, my religion is love. I don't care if you worship Jesus, Buddha, a sheep, a goat. What I care about is, are you loving or are you not?
Welcome back to Rise Podcast, life stories of accomplished individuals. Guys, today I'm really excited to jump in with my guest. I'm going to read the bio and we're going to get right to it. Kute Blackson, author of the national best-selling books, The Magic of Surrender, Finding the Courage to Let Go, and You Are the One, is renowned for his dynamic approach to spiritual awareness. He's a transformational teacher and an inspirational speaker who brings a novel and invigorating perspective to spiritual growth in today's complex world. With his roots in Ghana, West Africa, and his heritage blending Japanese and Ghanaian ancestry, Kute's life experiences across 4 continents have profoundly shaped his unique method of transcending traditional boundaries and unlocking the deepest potential and brilliance in people. Kute has earned a combined audience of over 660,000 people across Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Kute, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here.
You know, I've been consuming your content over the last few weeks. At first, in preparation for this episode, but it really started to become a very organic consumption of your content because I found it. Yeah, I found it. I'm breathing because I feel that this episode might turn into a session of just like a counseling session, of kinds, which I believe the audience will really get a lot of benefit from. But before we jump into, I have a million questions in regards to your expertise. Sure. But before we do that, what I like to do in this show is I like to have a biographical discussion with my guests to understand their backgrounds. So I want you to start off by telling me about one particular thing, and I'd like to know how old you were when this particular thing happened. And I want to talk about the truck incident in India. I'd like for you to get into that. And that's when you had the near-death experience and the acceptance, because I read that in researching you. So can we start off with that story?
Yeah, I think that was probably the first time I went to India. So I was in my early 20s. Mm-hmm. And it was in the car, I'm assuming, because I've had a couple of near-death experiences in vehicles in India. It tends to happen almost every time. Wow. And I was in the back. I had just come out of meditating for probably 2 weeks with a spiritual teacher, and I was in a state of total peace, or so I thought. And I was in the back of this car on a 2-lane little road in the middle of nowhere, and the car was going at 100 some miles an hour, full speed. And I remember looking up and seeing a truck coming towards us, and literally we were bound for a head-on collision. And at first I freaked out a bit, and then I realized that there was nothing that I could do. There was nothing that was really in my control. I wasn't driving the car. I wasn't driving the truck. I couldn't jump out of the car. And so in that moment, I remember just, everything happened so fast in that moment. So I remember just letting go and just relaxing. And I closed my eyes, and I remember flashing and thinking, oh, okay, so this is how it happens. This is how I go. But it all happened in such a split second. And I closed my eyes, preparing for the moment of death. And I remember feeling the car spin around a couple of times, and the car came to a standstill on the side of the road, clearly on a kind of ditch, sort of grassy area. And I remember I opened my eyes, and I was a bit stunned, in a bit of stress and shock. And I look around and I was still alive, and I wasn't sure if I was alive or if I was dead. And I looked around and I realized, okay, I'm still here. And it was a surreal moment because I was sure I was about to die. And then what was even weirder was, after coming out of this shock, the driver, who I knew very well because he'd driven me for years on and off,
Hmm.
just, casually, nonchalantly started driving again on the road, and, you know, looked around, and I looked around and I said, hey, you might want to drive a bit more slowly. And he was just cool as a cucumber, like, don't worry, like, God is in control. We're good. And he just kept
Wow.
driving. And that was a moment. But I've had many, many moments traveling and many moments in India where I faced death and I was sure I was going to die. And it changes you. When you face your death and you face your mortality.
Hmm.
And I think so many of us, we are afraid to die. And in that fear of death, I think we're also afraid of living fully because we're so afraid of dying. And so when you really face your death and you make peace, then a fear drops away. You kind of realize, like, well, fuck it, what do I have to lose? And it frees you. And I think for me, facing death over and over again freed me up from the fear of dying, which freed me up to live more fully because, like, well, what's the worst that could happen? I would die.
Right.
And I kind of faced at least part of that. So let's go and let's get on with
Yeah.
the business of living. And so
I
that
feel
was a profound
I,
moment.
I feel it makes, from the story you're telling me, I feel it, people who have near death experiences, it gives them a deeper appreciation. And yeah, kind of going back to, the narrative around gratitude, do you feel it made you more grateful to be alive and more grateful for everything going on in your life, like even down to the minor details?
Yeah, it made me more grateful. I mean, I wouldn't call mine a near death experience in a typical way people say, like they died and then they went to the other side and then they looked
Right.
down and they saw the light. It wasn't like
Yes.
near death like that. It was like near death where I nearly died and I thought I was dying.
Yeah.
And so I went through the process of dying without actually having to die. Um, yeah, it made me more, I would say, bold in living life,
Wow.
you know.
Could take
That,
me
that's what I would say.
Yeah, take me back to the early days. I mean, you've authored a couple of books. I think your content it goes deep into the human experience. But I'd like to understand how you got to this point. So I believe your uh, your mother was from Ghana,
No,
and
my father's from Ghana.
your
My
father's from
mother
Ghana,
is
and
my mother is Japanese.
okay,
I grew up in London. I live in the U.S. and sometimes Mexico, so I feel like
mhm,
I'm from everywhere and nowhere. And as a young boy, some would say I had a bit of an unusual childhood, in that um, I was from everywhere. I didn't fit into any nationality. I'd go to Ghana, I didn't feel Ghanaian, and they would tease me at being a foreigner. I'd go to Japan. I obviously didn't exactly look Japanese, and I
right,
didn't fit into the British system at school. And so it drove me very deeply at a young age to question myself and find, you know, to really ask myself the age old question, like, who am I and what am I really, truly? What is my true identity? Where am I from? Where is home for me? And so I had a bit of an unusual childhood. I thought my childhood was quite normal, but the reason I say unusual is, as a young boy, my first memories, I remember being around age 7, age 8, seeing a crippled woman crawling on the floor. She picks up the gravel, the sand that this man walked on, wipes it on her face, and stands up. And so we could call that a miracle. So week after week, I grew up seeing blind people see and deaf people hear, and people stand up out of wheelchairs. The same man whose sand, the gravel she picked up, would look at a person in a wheelchair and say, "Hey, why are you in this wheelchair? Stand up. You're not sick." Or the same man would look at a person who'd come in with crutches and say, "Hey, throw your crutches away." This man was my father, and he was considered the miracle man of Africa. And so he built 300 churches in Ghana, West Africa, and all over West Africa. A huge church in London, 4,000 to 5,000 people every Sunday in the 80s at the height. And he was a very mystical man, a very spiritual man, a very
Sorry,
metaphysical
when
man.
I apologize for interrupting. When you say was, is your dad not around anymore?
Yeah, my father's no longer. My father's
He's passed
away. Yeah,
Mhm.
but I would say he was very spiritual because he went to India in the 60s before I was born and had an enlightenment experience, but kept his churches, and so he taught a very sort of metaphysical, elevated teaching, on in terms of like the real meaning of what Christ was teaching. And so I grew up in a very spiritual tradition. My father would have like 1,000 books on his bookshelf in his office. And I, as a young kid, around age 8, age 9, age 10, I sneak into my father's bookshelf and read all of these spiritual books, everyone from the Eastern mystics, people like Krishnamurti and Osho and Ramana Maharishi, to Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, to Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, Marianne Williamson, Deepak Chopra, Dan Millman, law of attraction stuff. And so this became my first self-help book was a book called Creative Visualization by a woman called Shakti Gawain. And it blew my mind as a young boy to understand how thoughts are creative and thoughts are powerful and thoughts become things. And so I became really obsessed with trying to understand, like, who am I and what's the nature of life? Is the purpose of life just to wake up, make money, have babies, go on vacation, buy a house, buy a car, and then die? Like, surely there has to be more to life than this, because I would see people. I went to a very prestigious school. I got a scholarship to this incredible school, and everyone in this school, their parents were presidents and kings and politicians and multimillionaires, and yet many of these folks seemed so unhappy. They had every reason to be happy, but seemed unhappy. And yet, in my father's church, some of the most uneducated, poorest folks yet seemed so happy, even though they had every reason to be happy. And so this made me question. And so when I was age 8, my speaking career began, in that I started to, my father threw me in the audience one day and said, speak. And that began my speaking career. And then when I was 14, I was ordained as a minister. And I was given the mandate to take over my father's organization. And everybody was happy but me. And you could say at 14, my entire life was basically planned out, set out for me. The whole trajectory of my life was planned. But I knew that this was not my path. I knew that this was not my destiny. I had this deep feeling inside of myself that there was a different calling. But I think, like many of us, I was too afraid to speak my truth. My fear was, if I dared to really speak my truth and tell my father how I really felt, I would be outcast. I would be alone. I would be abandoned. I would lose his love. And so for 4 years, I tried to fit myself into a box of what I thought I needed to be in order to be loved.
The box your father created for you.
Yeah, the box he created. And I was look. I just wanted my as a young kid. I just wanted my father's love. I wanted his validation. I wanted his approval. But when I turned 18, is when everything shifted, because I tried to suppress my truth for so long. And I think when we suppress our truth, when we suppress our authentic feeling, our soul, that's when we make ourselves sick. That's when we make ourselves depressed. That's when we end up experiencing unhappiness. You cannot be truly fulfilled and happy being someone that you're not and living someone else's life. And so when I turned 18, there was a very pivotal moment in my life when I felt my soul, literally something at the depth of my being, calling me in a different direction. And it made no sense to my logic, but I think I found that, when your soul guides you, it often isn't comfortable. When your soul guides you, it often doesn't make sense to your mind. It's often inconvenient. And
Because your mind has ego. So ego
because it often doesn't make sense to your mind. Because the guidance of your soul, which is that unconditioned dimension of yourself, ego and mind and personality is really conditioned by parents, childhood experiences, trauma, successes, failures, religion, school, education, social media, and everything that everyone has told you from your past. And so
Mhm.
whatever we create from our ego is still limited in some sense to past experience. And so when we receive information from our soul, and your soul's like, turn left, turn right, do this, do that, it often doesn't fit your mind's limitation.
Right.
Launch that business, create that thing, go here. It's like, wait a second. And the mind, the ego is always trying to figure and understand things out, because the ego thinks that if I can understand something, then I can be in control. And if I can be in control, then I don't get hurt. And so we're
Right.
always trying to figure out the intuition. We're always trying to understand why we're guided to do what we do. But the deeper guidance is bigger than your mind. It's bigger than your ego. It arises from somewhere deeper. And so I believe, from my lived experience, when you follow your soul's guidance, you will always end up in the right place at the right time with the right people doing the right thing, even though the route that you take may not always be the one that you thought or you expected or you thought it was going to look like. And so my soul said, leave the church,
Yeah.
renounce everything, give everything up. And that's when I decided I had to let go of everything. I needed to have a conversation with my father, and I
How did
literally
that go?
renounced everything.
How did that go? I mean, that's first of all, I just wanted to make a couple of statements in regards to there must. I want to reinforce. I agree with you in terms of there's more to life than simply becoming wealthy and marrying the correct person and having children. I completely agree with you, because there are so many people that I personally know that are left unfulfilled with big gaps that they can't identify what those gaps are, and they have the money and they have the fame or the power and they have the partner and the children and the home. And so I completely agree with you. When it comes to your father, to the path that your father had created for you, obviously it was very well intentioned. I mean, you were his son, and his intention was to, I guess, provide you or furnish you with purpose and a life that was meaningful and successful by his metrics of success. And then talk to me about that meeting, because I think that a lot of people, and people in this audience, who they are told by their parents, and I have 3 small children myself, so I have to be conscious of not
Yeah.
overstepping. Well, it's a fine line, right? It's a fine line, because as their father, I want to, just like your father, I want to do the absolute best for them. I want to make sure that they become the absolute best version of themselves, and happy and fulfilled, not only on the seemingly, to your point, not only the seemingly obvious things like the wealth and the partner and the kids and the family and all of those things, but that undefined part that I want to get into with you on the spiritual plane. I'm going to do my best to fulfill them and to make sure that they're happy in all senses. That'll be my goal. But at what point do I prevent myself from overstepping and making them miserable as a result? Because I see parents going too far. And it sounds like your dad pushed you, I guess, to a certain point where he had created this path for you, this very well-defined path, and you made a decision. I think you said at the age of 18, correct?
18. I would say my soul made the decision more
Your
than me.
soul made the
Yeah,
decision.
my
So,
soul made a
so who
decision.
was it? Who was it that had to go talk to your dad? I mean, was it you or your soul?
Yeah,
Because
my soul made a decision, but in reality, the soul expresses through the personality. And so I,
right,
as Kute, had to go and have the conversation with my father. I think our soul, which is the real essence of what we are, it doesn't care about comfort. It doesn't care about convenience. It cares about evolution.
yes,
We incarnate as souls into the human experience in order to learn, to grow, to evolve, to remember and realize and express who and what we truly are. And so for me, life is like a university for our soul's evolution. Everyone is your teacher, every experience is part of your curriculum. And so at 18, when I got this clarity, I was terrified. I got this clarity when I was 14, but it took me 4 years to muster the courage to be able to have this conversation. Sometimes people think that when you there's this sort of misconception that when I find my purpose in life, then you know the violins play and everything is easy. Even self-help books want to sell this idea that, yeah, when you find your purpose, everything is just effortless. It's bullshit. I think sometimes when
hmm
you find your true purpose, that's when the real challenges begin. And that's when you sometimes have to face and go through tests and difficulties and dark nights of the soul. And many times people think that they're on the wrong path because, wow, I'm following my purpose and things are getting harder. But those tests are really, we could say, soul tests that you have to go through in order to grow so that
Yeah.
you can develop into becoming the person that is capable of fulfilling the dream and the vision that you are being shown. And so at 18, yeah, it was terrifying.
How did it
And
go? How did it go? What did he say to you when you
I
told
was
him?
terrified. I had to grieve for years the loss of my father. And the only way I could really have the conversation was grieving the death of the relationship. And I had to make peace before the conversation that I might actually lose my father. And we might actually, like, I had to make peace with the worst case scenario. And even though that wasn't easy, when you're able to make peace with the worst case scenario, it frees you, you know. And I not only made peace with that, I grieved it and said, okay, I may never have a relationship with my father again. Okay, years of crying and grieving. Okay, and when I got to that point, I tiptoed up the steps to my father's bedroom,
Mm-hmm.
trembling, scared, afraid. I don't believe you have to be fearless in order to rise and live your destiny. You can do it afraid. And to me, this is what it is to be courageous. I was terrified, and I looked my father in the eye and I said, I'll never forget the moment, Dad, I love you, but I'm not, I don't want to take over. The scare that I thought my life was over, man. And I think that was the moment as a boy I became a man. Because you could say it's as though as a boy, I had to, in quotation marks, kill my father. I had to face my father. I had to kill my father. I had to break my father's heart. That is the moment I remember feeling like I became a man in a certain sense and became willing to take responsibility for the consequences of my actions and face my life. And my father really didn't say much. I thought he was going to scream and be upset because he's very old school.
What did
All
he
he
say?
said was, are you sure? This was worse. I mean, I'd rather he just screamed. He said, are you sure? And I thought, I almost wanted to say, I'm not sure, but I said, yes, I'm sure. And he said, okay. I walked down the stairs. I cried for the next 2 hours. My father and I didn't speak for 2 years. That's how it went down. And it was difficult. It was painful. It was
He
heartbreaking
was angry.
because
He was angry at you.
I think he felt disappointed, right? He felt betrayed. He felt disappointed. He felt like that. He had his own shit. You know, this is just my dad. I love my dad, but he has his own shit and he has his own humanity in a certain sense. And so he had certain expectations that he felt weren't met. And I remember feeling so terrified because I felt like I had blown up my life. But I felt like something inside of me, that soul, was guiding. It was bigger than me. And I remember saying a prayer. I said a prayer to God in that moment. I said, God, if any of this spiritual, you know, self-help stuff is real, if you're real, if this stuff I'm reading is real,
Yeah.
I need to know right now that I'm on the right path, that I'm being guided. Within 2 weeks, I'm in the library of my school. I'm 17 and a half years old. Someone gives me a magazine called The Economist, and I've been looking for a sign. I chose not to go to university, by the way, so my prospects
Mm-hmm.
weren't great. And I was looking for a sign. Someone hands me a magazine called The Economist, and I felt a chill in my body. I look in the back of the magazine, and it says the American government is giving away 55,000 green cards in the green card lottery. And that's when I knew. I could feel it. And I entered the green card through this law firm, and I was told, this was in April, I was told that unless you're notified by September the 18th, then just move on with your life. And sure enough, every day I'm visualizing, I'm meditating, I'm praying, and I go to the mailbox. This is pre-internet. I go to the mailbox, nothing. September the 18th rolls around, nothing. I'm pissed off. I'm mad at God. I'm mad at the world. I told my mother, I feel so cold to go to America that I am going to I'm 18 years old. I'm going to pack my bags and I'm not coming back to the UK where I was living at the time Basically, I'm going to America illegally, and I'm just going because I feel so strong about this calling. That night, we get a phone call from the US, from the law firm. And he says, "Is this Mr. Blackson?" And I said, "Yes." And the lawyer said, "This is the law firm that applied for your green card in Washington." He said that we just got notification today that you won a green card. He goes, "I can't believe it, but you won." And I remember jumping around, hugging my mother at midnight in the UK, going, "Oh my God, we won it. I won a freaking green card in the green card lottery. This is insane." And then I heard a voice that said, the still small voice that has always guided me. And it said, "Why do you seem so surprised? You knew you were going to win. Did you lose faith? Did you not believe?" And so maybe I just share that because maybe there's some folks listening to this conversation right now, and maybe you're in a moment of your life where you're questioning. Maybe you're in a moment of your life where you can't see your future. Maybe you're in a moment of your life where you've given everything to your dreams and things seem not to be progressing in the level and in the way that you really want, and you're about to give up. But I want you to know that sometimes when you're in the darkness and the dark times, what I have found going through many dark nights of the soul, when everything seems dark and you can't see the light, the darkness is not sent to break you. The darkness is sent to force you to go inside. Because when there's nothing but darkness, there's no distractions. And that darkness forces you to go inside to find the light that is within you. And many times, right before the breakthrough, you have to face the darkness. Right before the breakthrough, there is a breakdown. And so for anyone that might be questioning, sometimes you think you're lost, but you're closer than you think. And so I almost gave up many times, even in that moment. But, for me, winning that green card was confirmation from the universe that I was on the right path. And there's been many moments since I came to the US where, man, I didn't have money. I didn't know how I was going to eat that day. I didn't know how I was going to pay my rent. I had like $8 in my bank account. I had negative in my bank account. I didn't know what was going to happen. And
Sorry, how old were you? Sorry, how old were you when you came to the United States?
When I was 18.
And how old are you now? And how old are you now?
Ageless.
You're ageless now?
I'm ageless now.
Okay.
I stopped counting my age at 18. And you know why? When I came to the US at 18, this is before social media and internet, I started kind of promoting my own seminars at 19, 20. And people would say, "You're freaking too young, man. Who are you?" And so at that moment, I said, you know what? I'm not going to let other people's perception of age determine my reality. And so literally at 19, 20 years old, I said, I'm going to stop counting my age and I'm going to be ageless, whatever.
So you don't celebrate your birthday, I assume.
To be honest, I celebrate every day, man. Honestly,
that is.
I actually don't. For the last 13 years, I've done an event in Bali, and it was during my birthday. So technically, I never really celebrate my birthday because I'm like, every day is my birthday.
I love it. I love it. I want to reinforce what you're talking about in terms of faith and belief, because you mentioned that you'd want to give this benefit to the audience in terms of if they're in a dark place right now. You don't have to look too far, because even with myself, there are so many times where I am anxious and nervous about certain outcomes, whether they're going to happen or not. And it's been like that my entire life. And the funny thing is that everything works out. Everything always works out. I was nervous if I would meet the right partner in life, and I did. I was nervous about my children, and my children are spectacular. I was worried about finances when I was younger, and I've done quite well for myself. And I noticed that I feel that all of that nervousness and all of that anxiety was just a waste of my life, because eventually everything turns out great because I continue to put effort into everything. So to your point, yes, I completely agree with you. I feel that by being anxious and nervous and allowing yourself to be in that dark place when you're anxious about certain outcomes, whether or not they'll happen, you're just robbing yourself of joy. You're robbing yourself of life and light. So I completely agree with you. Tell me about how you got to where you are now. So you started down this path. You're obviously you've got a very meaningful social media presence. How did you do this? How did you transition into this? So you came to the United States. You're 18 years old. You're broke. It's
Broke,
scary. You're
broker than
18,
broke, broker than
broker
broke,
than
man.
broke. I've been there. I get it. So I guess my question to you is, look, you're 18 years old.
Yeah,
You're 18 and like you're young. That's scary. You're
yeah,
broke. You're in a country by yourself.
yeah.
You're estranged from your father because you've let him down, right?
Mm.
You've had that conversation with him. I'm assuming your mom's not too happy about you
No,
leaving.
my mom was my only supporter.
Okay. Okay. And so you're in the United States. You're 18. What city were you in at this time?
Look,
LA?
I moved to Los Angeles
Hmm.
specifically because for me, LA was the spiritual mecca of the world.
Yes.
And a lot of people say, come on, you're crazy. LA is full of it. No, LA, all of the, I read probably 800 self help books from age 8 to 18. And most of the authors I'd read, Tony Robbins, Marianne Williamson,
Yeah.
Louise Hay, they all lived in LA or San Diego. And
Sure.
so for me, this was the mecca. And so I
Yeah.
specifically came to LA because I wanted to find these people. I wanted to learn from these people. I wanted to go into this field of seminars. And I would sneak into my father's church in the middle of the night when I was in London from age 11 to age 18. And a lot of people don't know this, but I would sneak into his church because we lived behind the church. And I would give seminars to the empty chairs for 2 to 3 hours a night, 6, 7 days a week, imagining I was speaking to thousands of people around the world, in America, in ballrooms, in hotel rooms. And I would
Hmm.
just talk for 2 to 3 hours in the darkness to empty chairs, sharing ideas about stuff I'd read in these self help books. And so this is why I came to LA. And let me tell you, it was not knowing a single person in the country, it was incredibly difficult. Um, yeah, I mean, I ended up the first time I arrived into LA. I got I got out of the airport. I asked the shuttle bus guy to take me somewhere safe and cheap where I could stay because I had no
Hmm.
idea. He dropped me off in Venice Beach, where 20 some years ago, Venice Beach was kind of crazy, and that was a culture shock. I cried for 2 weeks, wanted to turn around, but I realized I couldn't go back because I kind of burnt that bridge with my father. And so
Hmm.
I had to keep going. And so, in a nutshell, I ended up getting a $250 a month studio apartment, which was tiny. And my first bed was a bed that I literally dragged off of the street that someone had thrown out into the trash. And that was my mattress. And as challenging as it was, I was happy because I was following my truth. I was following my soul. It was difficult. There were moments where I literally had to make a dollar last for 4 days. There were moments where I literally would go into a supermarket and sort of steal bread to just eat. I had no idea. I struggled. It was difficult, but I felt as though I was on the right path. I felt as though I was following my truth. And there was a feeling of, even if I fail, even if I don't achieve and make it to where I think I'm being guided, at least at least I'll fail on my own terms. At least I'll fail following my own guidance rather than succeed. Like if I followed my father's version for my life and I projected
Yeah.
age 20, age 30, age 40, age 50, I could maybe be hugely successful by the world standards. But if I don't have myself, if I don't
Right.
have my truth, if I don't have my integrity, if I don't have my own soul, what kind of success is that? It only leads to misery. And so even though it was challenging in the beginning, I felt like I was on the right path and I felt like I was guided every step of the way. And the big breaks came for me where I remember riding a bus to go to a business convention,
Yeah.
a business expo downtown, the
Hmm.
convention center. And again, another magical moment of synchronicity where life sort of unfolds itself and reveals itself was when someone calls me. I just got a phone installed, landline, and someone called me up and said, I got your business card at this event. I don't have a business card. I got your business card at this event. And she started pitching me on this multi-level marketing company. I'm like,
Got
well,
it. Yeah.
I'm not interested. And so she referred someone to me, someone else called me. And the other person that called me said, look, I'm a part of a multi-level marketing company. And Les Brown, Brian Tracy, Stephen Covey, Jim Rohn, Dennis Way, all these motivational icons are involved in this thing. And when I heard that, I thought, this is why I came to America. And so, long story short, I got involved in this multi-level marketing company, signed up a bunch of people in literally 3-4 months. That connected me with so many people, Jim Rohn, the promoters of Jim Rohn, the promoters of Les Brown. I started promoting seminars. And through that just led to my network expanding and growing. And I mean, I won't bore you with the story, but a pivotal moment happened when I was promoting a seminar for some of these folks. And the sales manager said, look, we've seen Jim Rohn like 8 times. It's kind of the same spiel, but you seem kind of interesting. Would you be able to come and do a talk and a training? This was like a car dealer, right? Would you be open to doing a talk and a training for my salespeople? And I said, sure. And so ended up getting my first speaking gig that way. And things just evolved.
Okay. Sorry, one moment. Yeah. I mean, look, here's my question. My question is during those dark times, because I believe that many people experience those times where they don't see the light. They don't see how they're going to get to their destination. They come with this dream similar to the dream that you had, and they're blocked. How do you get through those difficult times? How do you get through that time where you don't see how you're going to make it? How do you continue to have that faith and that belief in yourself?
You know, here's what I found. Let me answer this way. I think when we're blocked or when we're stuck and dreams don't manifest, because I've been in situations where dreams did not manifest and I had to figure it out. Looking back now, there's maybe 3 or 4 reasons why dreams don't manifest. If you can understand this might help. The first reason I found that dreams sometimes don't manifest is the dream or the goal that you are pursuing, the car, the house, the career, the thing, is really not in alignment with your soul. Shall we say the dream that you think you want is not really what you truly want, it's just what you think you want based on who you think you are. And so you could say it's an ego-based false dream. And so sometimes it doesn't manifest because the vision is not authentic and you're trying to make something happen that isn't really real. It's not really authentic. And so I think the dream not manifesting can be a feedback from the universe to force you to course correct, saying, hey, dig deeper. Like, you want to be an actor and be famous like Tom Cruise, but that's not what you really want. It's just you think you need that in order to prove that you're lovable for your dad, but that's not what you really want to achieve. Like, and so even though you push for that goal, that's a form of seeking external validation. It's not truly authentic for you. So when you're faced with that, I think it's important, rather than trying to force, to step back, be still, pray, meditate, question, self-reflect, and have the courage to ask yourself, is this what I really want? Is this really true? Is this authentic? Is this my authentic expression? Like, what am I seeking to get from this goal? And I think when we can step back and reflect on what is true, what is authentic, COVID and the sort of time off in COVID for many people forced many of us to reflect, like, what am I doing with my life? What do I really want? And so I think self-reflection, taking the time to self-reflect and connect and listen to your soul. So that's one thing. Another reason goals don't manifest is timing. Like, just because something isn't happening now doesn't mean it's not meant to happen. And just because something isn't happening in the time that you think you want it to happen doesn't mean it will never happen. And so many times, from the lens of the ego, we want what we want and we want it now. And we try to force things to be in a timing that, or a season that is not. And so what we have to realize is it may not be your season yet. It may not be your timing yet. So we have to learn to sort of cultivate patience. We have to learn to sort of get in sync with the divine rhythm, with divine timing, and trust. Like, there's certain things that I wanted. Like, I remember really wanting to meet my soulmate 20 years ago, and it wasn't timing. And I met my
Right.
soulmate years ago, and it was the perfect timing. And I think to myself, shit, if I met my wife 20 years ago, I would have completely screwed it up. I
Yes.
wasn't ready. And so
Yeah.
if the mango isn't ripe, yeah, you can pluck it and eat a green mango,
Yeah.
but it's not going to taste good. And so
No.
many times we get impatient and we try to force things. So I say, cultivate patience, step back. So number 3, the third reason why things don't manifest is, look, I said that we're souls, and as souls, we incarnate into this human experience. Life is like a university for your soul's evolution. Everything and everyone is part of your teacher. Everyone is your teacher. Like, we're in a constant process of evolution. So I think one of the reasons why things don't manifest is you have not learned the lesson or the lessons where you are with who you're with. And when we don't learn the lessons where we are with who we're with, we block the next level of manifestation. All lessons are repeated until learned. And so unless we grow, unless we evolve, unless we learn, in a relationship example, you're going to manifest the same person over and over and over again. Even if you leave this relationship, you'll just attract someone that looks different with a different name from a different nationality, but the same patterns, issues, problems will be there because you carry yourself wherever you are. And so to me, you don't manifest what you want. You manifest who you are. And so when you start understanding that, we have to look at, okay, if I'm stuck and not manifesting, we have to step back and do the self-reflection and ask yourself, why am I attracting this situation?
Yeah.
What is this situation reflecting to me about myself? What is it showing to me about myself that I need to deal with, that I need to let go of, that I need to heal, that I need to make peace with? What is the lesson in this situation that I need to learn? What is the lesson in this situation that I don't want to learn, but I need to learn? Because if we can learn the lesson where we're at with who we're with on that spiritual soul level, that is the key that unlocks the lock to the next level of manifestation in life.
I want to jump in for a second, and I want to mention something. So, you talk about the ability to do this. I mean, you talk about it, and I feel like it's almost like taken for granted that you should be able to be so self-reflective in order to see these things and therefore execute on them. But here's my question. It seems to me that in order to be able to identify the things that you're talking about, you need to have a certain level of spirituality. You need to be connected to your soul. Really, my question to you then is, so the advice you're giving, I completely agree with, but my question to you is, how do you develop yourself from a spiritual perspective? What are the daily habits that you need to execute on?
I'll give you one. Let's cut all
to get to this place.
Let's cut all the spiritual bullshit aside.
Okay.
No spiritual conversation.
Okay.
But I'll give you one thing that if you do every day, will completely change your life. I don't care if you're spiritual. I don't care if you're not spiritual. Here's the thing.
Please.
The one thing that stops us from being free, or at least one place where we can start, the one thing that stops us from being free, fulfilled, happy, at peace, manifesting the next level, are all the ways that we lie to ourselves. To me, that's the key. If you start looking at what lies am I telling myself, as human beings, we are constantly lying to ourselves. We stay in relationships that we know is not right. We enter relationships we know is not right. We work jobs and situations that we hate, that we know we might be compromising our truth. We say yes when we mean no. And so I think if we're willing just to begin by asking the question, and reflecting on the question, what am I lying to myself about? To me, that is the foundation and the key to transforming your life. There is no transformation without truth. You can pray, you can go to temple, you can go on a sabbatical, you can meditate, you can do yoga, you can do whatever. But if you're bullshitting yourself and lying to yourself, nothing will change. Not even God can help you. Sit down and ask yourself, what lies am I telling myself? And now somebody might say, but if I'm lying to myself, how do I know I'm lying to myself? It's simple. Because if you're lying to yourself, then you really think that the truth you're believing about yourself is the truth. Here's how you know you're lying to yourself. It manifests in a few ways. Number one, emotional pain, depression, constant stress and anxiety, feeling contracted, constant sense of not feeling happy. Like emotional pain is a sign. Pain is a signal. If you're feeling that constant sense of depression and heaviness and frustration, it can be a sign that you're lying to yourself. Physical pain, a physical ailment, a backache, shoulder ache, neck ache, constant manifestation in your body. It's almost like your body, your subconscious is speaking to you. You think it's random, but your subconscious speaks to you through your body. Ongoing disease, again, your subconscious speaking to you through your body. Another way that it shows up is you manifest people in your life that reflect to you the truth that you have not acknowledged or you've disowned, which might sound like, hey, Gary, why do I keep so many angry people around me? Why do I keep attracting angry people? And you think it's people that are angry, but you keep attracting to you people that resonate, and they're showing you your own disowned resentment, frustration, and anger. And so that's what keeps manifesting in your reality. And so I think that if you're experiencing these things, there's probably some level at which you're not telling the truth. And when we lie to ourselves, it is painful. It's meant to be painful.
How do we stop? How do we stop lying to ourselves?
First, you have to acknowledge. See, the thing is, here's the thing. Pain is your friend. Pain is a blessing. The challenge with it is in our cultures, when we feel some level of pain, dissatisfaction, frustration, depression, resentment, jealousy, some pain, what we do is we drink it away. We distract ourselves.
Yeah.
We drink it away, smoke it away, sex it away, porn it away, shop it away, travel it away, drink it away, social media away, whatever we need to do so that we don't feel the pain. But that pain is a signal. That pain is showing you, hey, Gary, something's off here. Something is off. Something's not right. Let me have a drink. Something's off. Let me just distract on social media. Something's off. Let me just go and exercise or meditate it away. I'm actually saying, no, that pain is a messenger. So sit with the pain. Acknowledge the pain. Feel the pain, because the pain is trying to teach you something. Don't run away. I'm not saying wallow in it, but I'm saying use the pain as feedback to show you what's not aligned.
Kute, you talked about several, let's call them vices or escapes. And one of the things that you talked about was social media. I want to address social media, and I'd like to get your opinion as to kind of the state of the world when it comes to the youth. What advice do you have for the youth who, again, I don't know your chronological age, but I'll tell you my chronological age, and I'm going to be 51 in a couple of days. And I had the advantage of growing up in a world that did not have communication at scale the way it does now. And when I've got a 10, 9, and a 5-year-old, I have 3 boys.
Wow.
And when I see the way that they're consuming content and media, I try to limit it as much as possible. It's scary. So I guess my question to you specifically is, what do you have to say to the young generation in terms of navigating their lives in this kind of ever complicated digital world where the publishers of content and the platforms themselves, they don't exactly have the most noblest of intentions. when infiltrating the minds of young people. So what would you say to young people who are living in this age of easily accessible information?
Wow. I would say there is a difference between information and true wisdom. And we live
How
in
do
an
you
age,
how do you
we
know?
live in an age of constant information.
Correct.
But just because someone is saying something doesn't mean they've lived it. I would invite a young person to get around real people,
Hmm.
such as yourself, real people in real life who are living what inspires them, living an example of possibility. Because many times what you see on social media is not real. We worship fakeness rather than realness. And many times, what is portrayed on social media is better than it is in real life. And so I would advise a young person find real mentors that have lived life and lived many, many seasons of life. Because
Yes,
many people that are on social media, they like read The Secret or read a spiritual book a year ago, and now they're a coach and trying to advise you on your life. It's
of
like the
course.
blind leading the blind. And so get around people 51, 45, 72, 92. These folks have lived life. Get around elders that have lived life. They've seen the winters and the springs and the summers, and they've been through so many cycles that they understand the nature of life, and learn from them, because you will be able to draw on their wisdom of lived experience of many cycles that will save you time, mistakes, energy, so that you will be able to use the technology. We have to use the technology, otherwise the technology uses us. So that you'll
Correct.
be able
Yeah.
to use the technology in a way that is wise. Because as technology in the accelerated rate of technology increases, unless our wisdom increases with it, we're going to create more destruction. We're going to become more disconnected. So I think when we can
Hmm.
get around the elders, those that have true wisdom, then the new generation can have a different relationship to the technology, and can use the technology rather than being used by the technology
I agree.
in a way that's wise.
I want to add to that, and I want to add to that that I agree with you that we have to listen to the elders. Um, but when it comes to social media, there are very many wise people who are online, who are creating content at scale and putting it out, who have large followings, such as yourself, and several others. I don't think that young people should stop consuming
Yeah.
the content of those people, but to your very, very valid point, they need to, in addition, speak with people who aren't necessarily influencers or content creators, and actually speak with people in real life, to your point, and not to abandon one for the other,
Yeah,
but to
no, it's not one or the
supplement.
other. Yeah.
Yeah, to supplement. I want to change gears, and I want to talk about something that I found. I've been consuming your content, and you recently put out a piece of short form content that talked about sex and talked about the connection between lovers during sex. And this to me is a very interesting topic. You talked about the connection that happens during sex, not just the physical connection.
Hmm.
I'm sure. Do you recall the piece of content that I'm
I
referring
think
to?
so. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can give me one
No,
second.
I
I'm
think so.
gonna.
I got it. I got it. Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, it's beyond the physical. It's the
Yes.
I guess the spiritual
Yes.
connection between people. So I want to preface this topic, because it's not so much. It's not like a single question that I have. It's an overall conversation. So let's see. I don't want to get too personal. With using myself as an example, but what I will say is that I feel that men and women, there's this disconnect sexually, where I feel that men look at sex in its physical manifestation, in the realm of physicality, and that is how men communicate their love for a woman, with the physical act of sex. And what I've noticed is that for women, especially as time goes on between two people who are partners and together exclusively, that it's more of a spiritual connection that they're looking for. So I guess, drawing from that piece of content that I found very interesting, that talked about that spiritual connection during the physical act of
Yeah.
lovemaking, how do men and women in today's day and age, how do we reconcile the fact that for men it is very much a physical act, and that physical act they are still connecting, they are still showing their love for their partner, whereas for women they're looking for this more deeper and emotional act of lovemaking, where the two, I find, don't always kind of like
Well,
there's a gap there. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm going to say something that might challenge something for men.
Please.
You know, men have this misconception that is physical, but that is an illusion.
Okay.
You see, what happens for a man when he has sex or when he has an ejaculation
Mm-hmm.
or when he has an orgasm? It feels spiritual. It feels physical at first. He's rubbing. It feels good. He comes. He ejaculates.
Mm-hmm.
It feels great for a moment. Then he needs it again, and he seeks it again. And so, but if you really step back and look at what's really driving him, you will understand that sex for a man is equally driven by the spiritual aspect. It's just not as obvious. So, when a man making love, he has his orgasm. What happens? In that moment of explosion, boom, it's freaking blissful, right?
Mm-hmm.
For all of us, guys, come on. It's just like, wow.
But it's fleeting.
But it's fleeting. What, 10 seconds? 15 seconds? A few seconds of just See,
Correct.
if you understand what happens in that moment, you'll see that what we're really seeking is a spiritual something. And I'm going to explain. There's a moment of orgasm for the masculine, for a man, that is like, boom. What happens is you dissolve in that moment. That moment of orgasm is a death of your ego, a death. In that moment, your thoughts, your worries, your stresses, your sense of limited ego self, no longer there. You are gone. And that dissolution, the French call it mini death, right? Mini death.
Okay.
That dissolution is the death of your ego identification, which is the ultimate sense of freedom.
Yes.
Which is what we are really seeking. What we're really seeking is the freedom that emerges from the moment of orgasm. But it's fleeting. So then we seek it again. Then we chase it again. And now what happens as men is we mistakenly believe that, when I have sex and I stick it in, have sex, and it happens with her or another person, then that's the source of it. So I need more of it. And
Right.
But when we understand that, what we're really seeking is a sense of true freedom, it changes the game. And so as men, what I would say is, it's important for us as men to cultivate a spiritual practice where you, as a man, because the deepest masculine drive is the drive for freedom. And we're seeking freedom in different ways. When I can make enough money, then I'm going to be free. When I can put the ball in a hoop and dunk, then I'm going to be free. When I have my orgasm, then I'm going to be free. There's a drive in the masculine psyche for freedom. It's how we're wired as masculine. And so, to the degree as men, and we're all conditioned as humans, but to the degree as men, we have been conditioned to believe that we are this limited body, ego, personality, that we identify as me. We will feel a sense of ego identity limitation. And that identification is what feels limiting, because now I'm limited to my body. And so we're seeking a sense of freedom. And so when we have sex, we have an orgasm. It's like, boom, for a fleeting moment. Why do we drink? Yeah. We drink for a moment. Because when we drink, we get a little tipsy, we get a little drunk. That sense of ego, like people often say, I feel looser. That ego identification loosens for a moment, and then in the morning comes back. And so as a man, I think it's very important that you cultivate a spiritual practice. A spiritual practice, whether it's yoga, whether it's meditation, whether it's hiking, whether it's, jumping in a lake, a spiritual practice that forces you to transcend and go beyond your limited sense of self. Mm-hmm. A guy that might fucking free solo rock climb and faces his death. Whatever that is for you as a man, when you are able to transcend your limited ego identification, and you're able to connect to the dimension of yourself as a man and realize that freedom is not out here. Freedom is your true nature. Freedom is what you are. And when you have a spiritual practice that helps you tap into the freedom of your being, then you're no longer dependent on sex to try to experience that freedom, because, shall we say, you're already dead. You're constantly dying to your limited ego self and your stories and your belief and your identity. You're already dead in your connection to the divine, in your connection to nature, to life, to source. Mm-hmm. You're already dead, and so you're not depending on sex to feel that sense of freedom. You are fucking free. And that is the true essence of freedom of being. And then as a man, when you're having sex and making love from that already free space, you're not trying to get something from your woman, or just trying to let me squirt it out, get it off, just, needing something from her. Then you can show up as pure consciousness and be the love that you truly are and give to her. Then lovemaking transcends meat friction. Then it moves into a deeper spiritual dimension, because you as a man are connected to source. She as your woman connected to source. Now it gets interesting.
You just, it's really interesting the way it makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to tell you why it makes a lot of sense, because I've been kind of playing with this dilemma, and I've been considering this, trying to reconcile the sexual differences between men and women. You just pointed it out quite accurately. I remember Valeria and I, Valeria's my wife, about a year ago, we were at a spiritual retreat. I call it a spiritual retreat. It was in Ibiza. It was in Spain. And there were a number of different workshops. And one of the workshops, people would go with their partners, and we would sit on the floor in a room. And the instructor was this specialist in sexuality, in human sexuality, but in spiritual sexuality. And she was trying to help us find a deeper connection. And I remember it vividly. And my wife will always laugh at what happened. We sat down on the floor. In a room full of other couples, and they gave us feathers, and we proceeded to lightly touch our partners with feathers. And I remember they put a feather, and up until then they were doing things that I just couldn't grasp. And when they put this feather in my hand and they told me to tickle my wife with the feather, at that point I said to my wife, I'm sorry, now I'm done. This is I don't get it. This is too much. They want me to tickle you with a feather? This isn't sexuality. This is nothing. This is nonsense. And the person who's putting on the seminar, I don't believe that they have any authority, because what they're completely disregarding is a man's innate kind of physical nature to perform this act. And, if you're trying to convert me into somebody who's going to tickle you with a feather, it's not going to happen. And I got up and I left the room. Now, the way that you've explained it to me, this connection to freedom, this connection with a spiritual act. So for example, I do sauna and cold plunge, and that to me is a spiritual act. Yeah. I'm very much considering, and everybody I've talked to so far has disagreed with me. I just finished taking a motorcycle course, because I have this urge inside of me to hit the open road, knowing the dangers and to connect with myself on an open road.
Seeking freedom.
Seeking freedom,
right?
Disconnecting from devices, and being on an open road with nothing to think about, but making sure I don't die on that road.
That's the freedom.
That's the freedom. So by doing these so what the bridge that you just created for me as the guy who walked out of that feather tickling situation, which I still like, I can't reconcile. Now I understand, in the sense that it is about seeking that freedom. It's about doing the cold plunges, putting myself in discomfort, pushing myself, being alone, being on that motorcycle, making sure I don't die on the road. All of that makes a lot of sense, because then when I come back to connect with my partner, then I'm my perspective has changed. So I thank you for that. That's really important to me. I want to switch gears again, and I want to
jump
talk
off soon.
Give me 3 more minutes.
Yeah,
This
no
one last thing, and then we'll go. I want to talk about the world in terms of the state of religion. You were a religious man, I assume. You talked about.
I'm not religious. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious.
So here's my.
I have no interest in religion. If anything, my religion is love. I don't care if you worship Jesus, Buddha, a sheep, a goat, a Ferrari, a Rolls Royce, Elon Musk, Trump, an iPhone. What I care about is, are you loving or are you not? Because you can recite the Bhagavad Gita, do 17 Tantra Sutras, but if you're not being loving, it doesn't mean shit to me. So I'm not religious at all. For me,
that's fair.
True spirituality is how you live your life. Is how you show up. Is, do you speak your word and honor your word? Do you live in integrity? To me, that's real spirituality.
I guess for me, so I appreciate that explanation. For me, the only thing I wanted to touch upon, and it may not be applicable to this conversation, is the state of religion. I find that the world is becoming more religious, when in my youth I had a theory that the world would become less religious as science would prevail to be kind of, the more, if you will, logical source of information. But I appreciate your explanation of it, and I don't disagree with you.
For me, religion, it's like there's so many people that are worshiping Jesus, but they're not living Jesus. What is the point of going to church? Jesus, 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 and you come out, you're bitching, gossiping, and moaning. You're cheating on your wife. It's like, what is the point? For me, I'm more interested in, Jesus said, love thy neighbor as thyself.
Right.
Okay. That means that for me, that's a level of oneness. That's for me true, if you want to call it religion, but I call it spirituality. That is what it's really about. Living the kindness in your every. Some of the most real people are the ones that never go to temple, never go to church, never go to a yoga class, never go to a retreat in Ibiza or come to my seminars, but just how they live their life, they're kind, they're honest, they show up, they don't speak the lingo, they may never listen to this podcast, but just they live with integrity. For me, that is love in action. That is real religion. That is real spirituality. For me, that's where it's at. And I think that's what we need in the world more than people, maybe this might be controversial, but you triggered the question.
That's okay.
Maybe one reason you're saying or seeing that the world might become more religious, right, is because as the world with technology, with AI, ChatGPT is going so fast and forcing people to reinvent and evolve so quickly, there's less stability to hold on to something. And so the human ego might seek some ideology to hold on to for a sense of security and safety. That might drive some people to religion rather than true spirituality. And so we seek something safe that doesn't change to hold on to. It's like the same shit that was, spoken about 400 years ago, that even though it may not make complete sense, let me
Yeah.
just hold on to something because everything else is changing. So let me hold on to this thing over here. And I think true spirituality is a constant relationship is your direct relationship with the divine, with life, to realize that you and I are not separate. It looks like we're separate, but the truth is, what is breathing me is breathing you. What is looking out of those eyes is looking out of these eyes. And underneath all of the sense of separate, illusory separate sense of self is an inherent underlying unity and oneness that is functioning you and I and all existence. For me, that's true spirituality.
It makes a lot of sense. Kute, I want to conclude with one of your quotes, which I think is very defining of you.
Cool.
And your quote is, "The question is not whether we're going to die. That's guaranteed. The question is, how will you live?" And on that note, I want to thank you. And I would like to know, how can people find you?
Thanks. This has been a fun interview. Appreciate your questions a lot. Appreciate your curiosity a lot. It's been fun. I would say a couple of things. My book, The Magic of Surrender, get it on Amazon. It's a super easy read. Goes into some deep concepts, but simplifies them, hopefully with not too much woo-woo in there. People can, I would say also, if people want to go deeper, if you're someone who, you feel ready for the next level of your life, twice a year, I would say it's the most transformational work that I do for someone who is ready for that next level. They're ready to heal. They're ready to transform. Twice a year, I do an event in Bali. It's called Boundless Bliss, the Bali Breakthrough Experience. 12 days, experiential immersion seminar training without walls. The next event in Bali is July the 20th through the 31st. I've done this event for the last 13 years. 2024 is going to be the last year I do this event. We take billionaires, entrepreneurs, change makers, and transform you from the inside out. So www.boundlessblissbali.com. You can find it there. And find me on Instagram, just my name, Kute Blackson.
Yes. Kute, thank you so much. This has been enlightening.